Your work and your organisation, the Commonwealth system, exists in the same world as the UN, and there are overlap, but we're seeing the Commonwealth issues as a separate issue, and going to draw some conclusions from what we hear from you and possibly from ministers later on. So can I begin by asking you a fairly general question, which is what role you see for the modern 53-nation Commonwealth in today's very unsettled and rather dangerous and fast-changing international context? How does it relate to the global networks that have emerged, the rising power of Asia, and of course to the work of the UN, if you have time for that as well? So general question, please, it's over to you.
Well, firstly, can I thank the committee very much for inviting me to come and speak to you today, because I think the Commonwealth has never been more important than it is now. As the committee knows, the Commonwealth is made up of 53 nation states, encompassing the countries of the smallest nature, like Nauru, which is less than 10,000 people, and the largest, India, which is 1.3 billion. The Commonwealth is joined by not only history, but a number of valuable values, inasmuch as they have a common language, common law, common institutions, common parliamentary structure, and encompasses 2.3 billion people. And what is so extraordinary about the Commonwealth is it has within its boundaries people of all races, all colours, all religions, and all cultures. And that enables the Commonwealth to do something quite extraordinary, and that is have a conversation between peoples from 6 regions of the world, encompassing 1/3 of it. And as you rightly point out, Asia is becoming increasingly important. When we look at Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, India, and others, there is where a great deal of power for the future lies. And you look at the 18 African states, together with the countries from the Caribbean and from Europe, and of course from the Pacific. So this eclectic mix enables the world to have a conversation through the prism of the Commonwealth, which I think has never been more important because of the troubling and troubled times in which we now live, where there are very few platforms where the broad spectrum of people who are encompassed within the Commonwealth actually come together and have an opportunity to agree. And I think one can see the power of the Commonwealth in terms of its ability to reach consensus by what happened last year, both in the UN Sustainable Development Goals and in COP21. For about 2.5 years, the Commonwealth had 53 heads had been discussing what the Commonwealth strategy should be, what was the strategic plan. And the essence of what the Commonwealth agreed prior to September 2015 was the Sustainable Development Goals. And if we look at what happened in September and reflect on the Commonwealth strategic plan, you see an almost mirror of the agreement and then the SDGs. And the same happened with the Commonwealth's approach to climate change. Many of the committee will know that the Commonwealth countries first started talking about Commonwealth commitment to climate change back in 1989 in the Langley conference. But since then, if you look just what happened last year in 2015, you had the consensus building across the Commonwealth that climate change needed to be tackled. We needed an aspirational target of 1.5 degrees, 2% had to be, 2 degrees had to be an absolute minimum, and we had to have enforceability. And the agreement arrived at in Malta in November was the mirror of what was then agreed in Paris. And one of the reasons for that is if you look at the Commonwealth 53, we had members in every single regional group who were pushing for consensus. In Barbados, CARICOM conference, the Caribbean had been able to speak very persuasively to Canada, who agreed with the Caribbean group that 1.5 degrees was right. Africa, then part of the ACP, was supporting the Maltese heads of government meeting. We had 52 countries, solid commitment to 1.5 degrees, and then, of course, 53 agreeing on 2 degrees. So that really demonstrates the power, amalgam of consultations that comes from the Commonwealth. And if we look at the troubles that now exist between our different cultures, our different races, our different regions, our different cultures, our different races, our different regions, then I think that the opportunity for the Commonwealth to be that consensus builder, that opportunity for sane, quiet conversation, I think has never been greater.
Thank you. Sorry, before I ask my next question, I will miss as Chairman. I should have mentioned that I have an interest to declare as President of the Royal Commonwealth Society and the Chairman of the Council of Commonwealth Societies. Can I follow up that very comprehensive answer by saying, yes, consensus
different perspectives. You'll know that we have small countries which are large as a continent and tiny countries. And there is no other the advantage of reading the Commonwealth in the unfolding global landscape, which was produced before I became Secretary General, and therefore I can laud it as a piece of excellent, dynamic, wonderful work. What it does is to identify the benefit of having that shared platform. Do it, Commonwealth Secretariat, to create an office of civil and criminal justice reform. Right at the moment, virtually every one of those 53 countries are going through a review of how to make the civil justice system faster, easier, as a way to enhance the efficiency and effectiveness of the civil justice system. What I am contemplating, and there is a big appetite for this, is to encourage the 53 countries to work together to create what I hope will become a seminal methodology which could be applied between all the 53. Because if we are all reviewing our systems together, why do we not review them simultaneously? And I propose that we will have the Commonwealth best practice models. Commonwealth best practice in relation to contracts, Commonwealth best practice in relation to template legislation, Commonwealth best practice in relation to regulation. Now, the great thing about the Commonwealth is it's consensual. No one has to adopt any of these procedures. But we know the parliamentary structures are very similar. The concerns that we would have in one of our member states are likely to mirror the concerns in terms of rule of law, integrity, good governance, and issues in relation to matters like corruption. They are all mirrored. So instead of the 53 doing them on their own, if we can coalesce around an agreed platform and produce these models, there's an opportunity for us to enhance the 19%, to get interoperability between the 53 and make it easier to trade. So we wouldn't be dependent on simple trade preference. We would have operational advantage, enhancing the 19%. I aspire to think about what our trading relationships would look like if we could increase that to, say, 30%. If you could get a 30% operational, practical discount for people working together, why would they not do that? And I have heard right the way across the Commonwealth the plaint that there are insufficient parliamentary draftsmen and women, and many countries are looking at the same issues. So this is an opportunity for trade and interoperability, which I think no other constellation of countries can deliver.
Thank you very much. Lord Hannah.
Yes, well, I think the British parliamentary draftsman may be prioritising something different, but let's leave that for the moment. There are two subjects which you haven't mentioned, but which seem to be of the sort that you've mentioned, one of which is migration, and the other of which is radicalisation. There are, after all, several Muslim majority countries in the Commonwealth, like Pakistan and Bangladesh, and there are others with large Muslim populations. Do you think the Commonwealth has a contribution to make in either of these two, and if so, how should it set about it?
I think it does have a contribution to make because of the eclectic mix of cultures that I've been speaking about. The Commonwealth is a family, and within that family there are common problems. So, for example, it's not just in those countries, but if you look at all of our countries, radicalisation, how we respond to the increasing threat of terrorism is real. And one of the opportunities we have is to try and disaggregate the threat that's made against us jointly so that we can better understand and identify the commonalities that are present in that threat so that we can together craft a better response to the terrorism, to the radicalisation that we all jointly face. I've been talking to a number of colleagues right across the Commonwealth, and one of the things I've been thinking about is if we couldn't do something which in my head I've been calling faith in the Commonwealth, because the Commonwealth has all faiths, and that we have enough faith in the institution and the framework of the Commonwealth to be able to have some of those quite challenging and difficult conversations. And I don't think we can leave faith out of the bailiwick of things that may be a contributor to the successful amelioration of conflict, as opposed to one of the ways it has been seen as being a causative source of difference. And if you look at the things that join the Commonwealth, a bit like our DNA, 99% of that which we have is in common, the 1% is different. So I am hoping, and I'm seeing this happening in the Commonwealth, that we are concentrating more and more on that which joins us as opposed to that which separates us. And there's a real better respond to radicalisation, creating steps which will help us jointly to respond to the growing threat of terrorism which is in our world today.
And migration?
Migration is a huge problem, not just in relation to the threat of terrorism, but migration as a result of climate change. Climate change poses an existential threat to the small and vulnerable states in particular, but all states in general. If one looks at what happened in Syria, part of the issue was to deal with climate change and the pressure that put on migration. We are going to, if we do not respond more energetically and more successfully to the climate challenge, going to see more and more migration take place as a result of climate change. So, for example, some of the small island states are at risk of being submerged below the waterline. A huge issue jurisprudentially is going to occur because at the moment the way in which the legal response to climate change is structured, once that island were to disappear, the country's entitlement to the waters that surround the island would disappear too. We now have big blue ocean countries, which are the small islands with the large seas around them. If increasingly we are now mining the seabed for the assets, and your entitlement to do so is dependent on the land mass, then we've got a very big challenge. We've also got challenges because if a whole population has to migrate from those islands to somewhere else, where are they going to go? Do they retain their sovereignty? Does the sovereignty get submerged or merged with the state to which they go? Are they able to sequestrate part of that receiving country and gain sovereignty over it? So there are a lot of complex, difficult, jurisprudential questions which we in the Commonwealth are looking at now to try and mitigate the potential problems that may come from migration. But you also have some really quite complex issues now in terms of access to different Commonwealth countries. There is a huge issue about immigration. For example, if the rules change in relation to the relationship between the United Kingdom and Europe, are there now going to be new rules refreshing the old rules that used to apply to Commonwealth countries in that regard? So there are a number of complex, difficult issues, but migration is a real issue for us to grapple with in terms of how that might impinge inappropriately and quite dangerously if we don't grapple with it now.
Thank you.
So issues we want to move on to. Lord Inglewood, have got one more on the general.
Do you mind if I take off
please,
my
Chairman.
jacket?
Yes, please.
As you take off your jacket, when you were telling us about your plans for legal work, it struck me that what you were describing was very similar to what Lord Cofield would have described he was doing in the run-up to the 1992 European single market. Are you trying to create a kind of single market, something even more ambitious than that across the Commonwealth?
I don't think I'm trying to create a single market, but what I am trying to do is to identify the benefits we currently have because of the common law. All of these countries either share the common law or wish to take advantage of the common law because the common law is the foundation stone of international law. So the models that we create in the Commonwealth will not just be of advantage to ourselves, but they could also be advantageous to other countries. So, for example, one of the things that I am working on now is to try and create an anti-corruption standard, very similar to the sort of thing we have with investors and people. How do you differentiate between those companies who wish to adhere to best practice and those companies and entities who do not? Now, over the last 5 years, since the introduction of the Bribery Act, it has come to be seen as the gold standard for anti-corruption legislation. We also have the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which is the United States model, but the Bribery Act is seen to be more encompassing and more successful. If we can, together, create a practical system which creates adequate measures, differentiating between those who aspire to be free of corruption and those who do not, it enables us to create a better platform right across the Commonwealth. That's a very practical, easier thing to do within the Commonwealth because we have similar institutions, similar models, and for goodness sake, I mean, some of our countries still wear wigs and gowns. So we have that familiarity within concept, the legal concepts. So if it turns out that de facto you have common themes and common practices, then operationally you create something that is more difficult to create by compulsion. The great thing about the Commonwealth is people choose to work together. They choose to share the models. They choose to share best practice. And what I hope we will continue to create in the Commonwealth are those models which, if they have real utility to the member states, will be used.
Now, you already alluded to Brexit, and Lord Wood has a question on that.
Yes, nice to see you here. Couldn't get through a session without talking about Brexit. As you know, the Commonwealth featured quite largely in the debate around Brexit, particular advocates of leave who saw the Commonwealth as an alternative or perhaps a form of alliance that could be expanded in the areas of trade and maybe foreign policy and other areas. I'm interested in your thoughts on that debate and how much ambition you think that our decision, the referendum, should trigger about a renewed commitment and new areas of interest in the Commonwealth, and maybe also some areas where it may be a mistake to think about the Commonwealth as an alternative to the European Union.
Well, I think it was really important, if that debate was to be properly understood, for people to listen to what the Commonwealth was itself saying and what the leaders of the Commonwealth were saying. I did not hear one leader within the Commonwealth suggesting that they thought it would be good for the Commonwealth if the United Kingdom was to leave Europe. The view that was very strongly held, I think, by most Commonwealth, well, I heard no one who disagreed with what I'm now going to say. So if there was a leader who had a different view, all I can say is it wasn't communicated to me. Most of the Commonwealth took the view that they had developed over the last 40 years a very mature relationship with the United Kingdom, a relationship which was interdependent upon the United Kingdom remaining with one foot firmly planted in Europe and the other foot firmly planted in the wider world, acting as a bridge for many Commonwealth countries between the Commonwealth and Europe. So if you look at issues which were of concern, for example, to Africa, when Zika and Ebola were being discussed, it was the Commonwealth who looked to the United Kingdom to lead in Europe on their behalf, albeit that there was Malta and there was also Cyprus. But those three European countries were the voice of the Commonwealth within Europe, which was a very important voice. So there was real concern because there was a worry that those who were seeking to make that division didn't fully understand the way in which the relationship between the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth had matured. The Commonwealth was now working hand in glove with the United Kingdom, but as equal partners. And the idea of the British Commonwealth was something of the past. There was now a new, modern, dynamic, interactive, interdependent relationship. So if I can give you an example of the difference 40 years would make, New Zealand, at the time that the United Kingdom went into the European market, had 70% of its income dependent on trade with the United Kingdom. Today, New Zealand has 7%. That's a very dramatic change. So as the United Kingdom looked to Europe, the Commonwealth had to look elsewhere also. The same was so with preferential markets in Australia. So the Commonwealth had got used to this new, developed, interdependent relationship, and the United Kingdom, together with Malta and Cyprus, was the vehicle which enabled the Commonwealth countries to have access to a 500 million citizenship community in the European market. So I think as a result of Britain's choice, and every leader said it was a matter for the people of the United Kingdom to make the decision as to what was in their best interest, and they now have. But I think it has caused real concern as to what does that mean now for the Commonwealth countries who had become used to that strong voice on behalf of the Commonwealth within Europe. And I'm not sure that was fully understood, that the Commonwealth would be so anxious and so concerned. So all the things that I've said in relation to trade was happening anyway. And the Commonwealth very much saw this as a twin-track advantage. So yes, we would continue to work, and the United Kingdom would continue in Europe, continue to be the bridge, continue to have the access, continue to give these opportunities. And at the same time, the Commonwealth would energetically, powerfully commit itself to enhancing trade within its membership. So the Commonwealth saw this not as an either-or. It was like a false dichotomy. It was and, not or. The twin track was seen as being materially important and advantageous. Now, the Commonwealth has absolutely accepted that the United Kingdom has made its choice, and now much more energy, if that's possible, will go into enriching the Commonwealth relationship and looking to see how we can strengthen that which we were already doing. But does the Commonwealth feel sad that it has had one of its legs amputated and now has a prosthesis? Yes. But can you really run really fast with a prosthesis? Well, we're going to have to.
Do you want to follow it up, or no, Lord Gurkhardt? You
No, I'll
okay, Lord Gurkhardt, you go.
I'm rather sort of reeling at the comparison there between legs being amputated and so on. Just the observation that the Commonwealth, of course, when Britain entered the common market, as then was one of the major reasons that caused anxiety, both with the initial application and also with the referendum that followed. And now, of course, as you well described, the position is reversed in terms of the Commonwealth. I suppose you could characterise that as being the status quo always being something which people rather favour. The status quo, of course, was led to a different conclusion then than now. But given all you said about the trading advantages that you're working so strongly towards, of trade with countries in the Commonwealth, and due to maybe it's badly reported, but certainly from countries like Australia as one, that look forward to some of the opportunities that may arise. Do you think maybe that talking about amputation may not be the most sort of constructive way?
Well, I suppose I was...
do you not see anything positive at all in the possibility of...
Let me be absolutely clear. I am hugely positive. Hugely positive. I probably was being rather florid as to how some people saw it. But absolutely frank about it, lots of people didn't actually understand the massive advantage that we have as a Commonwealth, because it hadn't been nailed down and articulated with a degree of precision until this came out. And this document puts flesh on the bones of what people felt about the Commonwealth. You know, people had warm, fuzzy, it's where we belong, it's part of our family, it's what we enjoy doing. But people then said, well, what's the point? Is there any real advantage to all this history and commonality? And just last year, 2015, was when it was nailed down to say, absolutely, what we can do together is phenomenal. And so if we had stayed in the European Union, we would have been motoring on this because of the economic trade advantage. Would we be doing some of the things that we will now do as members, and that is trying to work out new deals on... No, probably not in the same way. So the fact that the UK made the decision to come out has put this on turbocharge. And the good thing is, we've already got it. It's not as if we're starting from scratch. We don't have a way to go. We do. And so now, if you like, the Commonwealth becomes more important than ever before. And so I need to really contextualise about how people saw it. Lots of people were really, really frightened about what would happen if the United Kingdom came out of Brexit. And you're always more frightened about something before it happens than when it has happened, and you've just got to get on with it and deal with it. So I was being humorous, because we also know that if you look at what's happening with people who have to adapt, they're still winning the race. And so it's not that you are less able, you just work out how to use what you have more creatively so you still go through that line. So I was not in any way suggesting that this was in some way disabling us. What I'm saying is, for those in the Commonwealth who did not want this to happen, for those in the Commonwealth who were frightened and worried about what has happened, for those who are saying, well, you know, if the United Kingdom sterling goes down and the trade balance is affected, and how am I going to get my remittances, and what about the effect on tourism and the dependence that Africa has, if they're frightened about that, then what I am saying as Secretary General is don't be. Don't be. Because we've already started on the method and the pathway which we together can make real changes deliverable. And I believe that now that the United Kingdom has made this decision, then the Commonwealth will become more pivotally important than it has ever been. But I'm also saying to people, just recognise that this relationship with the Commonwealth is the modern Commonwealth. It's a Commonwealth of equals, and people are interdependent, and just as people will be looking to get something, they'll be looking to give something. And one of the things that I know a lot of people are to the United Kingdom in terms of migration that they had before. Will there be additional benefits for having reignited the Commonwealth family? So it's not it's a complex series of conversations, but I am absolutely confident that what we have now discovered and developed, the things I want to do on the civil justice and on the criminal justice, because we are all facing similar criminal justice issues, and we will be better able to face them if we face them together. So if you're asking, am I positive? Absolutely. Did the Commonwealth want it? I don't think they did. But will they work incredibly hard with all its members to derive the new benefits that now may be available? Absolutely.
Baroness Smith.
I have actually read that document because I was asked by the Commonwealth Roundtable to speak on a panel at the beginning of the year with Jim Carver of UKIP as their Commonwealth spokesperson. And he read out a speech, and I actually agreed with 90% of what he was saying, because what he was saying was all very positive about the Commonwealth, but as you said in your opening remarks, it in many ways is both and. And so my 10% difference was really that it should have been the EU and the Commonwealth. But one of the issues about trade is that at the moment, if I've got the figures right, Germany exports about 4 times as much, say, to India as the UK does. So you said, well, we're going to turbocharge the trading relations and so on. But is the issue really something that the Commonwealth is going to be able to help the UK with? Or is it something that we need to be thinking about domestically? Because the inability to export isn't because of EU membership. Because if it were, Germany wouldn't be doing as well as it is doing.
I think it's that we now have to recalibrate the relationship in order to take the benefits of the new situation we find ourselves in. So this document helps us to identify where that 19% advantage lies. Now, no one had mined and identified the advantage before. So this gives us the springboard to say, okay, if it's because of common law, if it's because of common language, if it's because of common institutions and common democratic processes, how do we enhance those? So, for example, at the moment, we have in the 53 different templates and ways of doing it, some of which mirror the others, some of which do not. So if we can do a needs-based analysis, understanding the level of trade that takes place at the moment between the Commonwealth countries, identifying where the barriers are, what the impediments between us working together are, target those impediments and barriers so that we look practically at how we make the interconnections between those different member states trading partners easier, and we have the opportunity to do that because we have common law, common practices. It means that we can together create an instrument which speaks to our strengths, and we can support those. So, for example, one of the areas in which I am going to look at first is extractive industries. We know that many countries within the Commonwealth partner together and undertake contracts which are multinational. At the moment, the differences between the legal structures within the Commonwealth are such that that can be quite a complex, long, difficult, troubling type process. If we are going to get mirrored procedures, if we are able to look at what the best new structure would look like, and if we all migrate to something similar at the same time, we get interoperability, we get portability and transparency. If we add to that that we have a common approach to anti-corruption, and we create what, when I was working as trade envoy to South Africa, we looked at, and South Africans created, a one-stop shop. So if you wanted to go and do business in South Africa, all your certificates and pass would all happen in one place. Some people had said before that it could take 5 years, going to all the different states and make it together. So if we have discovered that a one-stop shop is the most efficacious way to facilitate business, and all 53 of us have a one-stop shop, and we do it in a similar way, we get portability, and we get to enhance the bones that we have identified together. And that's how we enhance trade. India is already looking at creating a small, an SME workshop facility for less developed countries within the Commonwealth. These opportunities of looking at the supply chain and how do we get the supply chain within the Commonwealth working together, how do we create a more symbiotic economy, a more circular economy within the Commonwealth to do the win-win. We also have all the new work that's coming out as a result of the climate change new agenda. There's an opportunity to look at what works. So, for example, the finance minister of Jamaica came to see me concerned about wanting to create telebanking, and was looking very carefully at how he did that. Also wanting to look at how he did e-assisted healthcare, and how did he do something better about domestic violence. Well, I was able to a smartphone. So because you've got 3G and 4G, they are able to triage people in their villages and in real time have consultations with the clinicians. We don't have that in most countries across the Commonwealth. So there's an opportunity for us to learn practical things of what works and swap ideas, support each other, and as a result get real difference. In Geneva, when I went to the Health Ministers' Conference, we decided that instead of talking from a script, we'd talk to each other. We'd talk to each other about the things that different countries within the Commonwealth were doing that works. How do we get a universal healthcare? And those conversations are really starting to happen. I went to Geneva again to talk to the UN. And the UN and the agencies are looking together as to how we work better on small and vulnerable states. The UN has 39 small states, vulnerable states. 31 of those small, vulnerable states are Commonwealth. So we are going to work in a conjoined way to deliver a better product for those small and vulnerable countries. And as you know, the Commonwealth has always been the champion of the small and vulnerable, less developed states. So there is huge opportunity if we work together and strengthen our commonality.
Thank you. We really covered both the Commonwealth, rest of Commonwealth viewpoint and the UK viewpoint about the present disturbances. But Lord Inglewood, do you have one more question on this before we move on?
Just to sort of clarify, because you're right. If I've understood you correctly, what you're saying is that the impact of Brexit on the Commonwealth is that Britain becomes, taken in the round, a less useful member of the Commonwealth, and presumably conversely, Cyprus and Malta become of more use to the Commonwealth. Is that right?
Well, I think that would not be a fair reflection. I think it would be fair to say Cyprus and Malta become the remaining voices for the Commonwealth in the European setup. But in many ways, there is not a diminution of the importance of the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom is the 5th largest economy. It has always been a treasured and valued member of the Commonwealth, and I don't think any of that's going to change. What I think will happen, in fact, is that the Commonwealth will become even more important to the United Kingdom, and as a result, I am sure the relations between Commonwealth countries and the United Kingdom will become even stronger. So I don't think there is any turning away. We've been saying that the Commonwealth needs to be an anchor for the 52 countries of the Commonwealth, and maybe now a safe harbour for the United Kingdom.
Values and principles. Baroness Cousins.
We know that the Commonwealth has sometimes been criticised for not upholding its own values and principles. For example, there are some Commonwealth countries who don't even want you to appoint a commissioner for democracy, the rule of law and human rights. Could you say something about your view of this divergence in values and principles, and what you think are the most important priorities for reform that you might be able to achieve in that regard?
Well, I think the first thing to say is that the Commonwealth has grown and changed. I thought it was really poignant when Her Majesty was addressing heads in Malta, and she spoke about how few democracies there were when she started her reign and the Commonwealth was born, and now how virtually all of Commonwealth countries are either democracies or aspiring to be democracies, and that's very different scenario. So what you've seen is an evolution which has grown in speed and substance and depth. And the Charter was, I think, a seminal moment, because the Charter, which was signed by all 53 countries, is an expression of the aspirations of all 53 in terms of where they want to be at the end of the journey, as opposed to necessarily where they are now. And the opportunity that we have in the Commonwealth is to have some pretty tough discussions with members who are at different stages of that journey. And one of the quite interesting and quite powerful things that we have been able to use is economics. If you look at what the World Trade and the World Bank is saying about real wealth and sustainability, the real sustainability is predicated upon social capital, building social capital. If you want to have a sustainable, long-term, healthy country, you have to have social capital. And the only way you build that social capital is making sure that every individual in your country, irrespective of their race, their religion, their ethnicity, their culture, their sexual orientation, and or their systems, has an equal opportunity to explore their talents and give of their best. If we look at women, we know that those countries where women have been well educated and are able to educate their children and are able to participate in the trade and governance of their countries, those countries exponentially receive great benefits. So making the economic case for good governance, human rights, has actually tended to be quite fruitful. And we will continue to make the moral case for equality and partnership, and will also continue to make the economic case as well.
Describe just the pressures that can be brought to bear on those who deviate or fail to keep up the pace. And there are some very obvious examples in the media are often pointed to. In what way can the Commonwealth system bring additional pressure for keeping up to the standards of the Commonwealth Charter that might not be available elsewhere?
Well, I think it's because the Commonwealth countries have been very receptive to receiving from the Commonwealth technical help, assistance and advice. I'll give you an example. I won't necessarily name the country, but one of the countries was, and actually a number of others said the same, said, actually, if we're brutally honest, we'd like to change some of these laws. We don't have a sufficient number of draftsmen and women. We have a very full, complex, difficult political agenda for a number of quite clear reasons. And therefore, we'd find it of great assistance if the Commonwealth was able to create best practice models which we can adopt. And because it's Commonwealth best practice models, not just one country, but we're saying this is an aspiration that all of our family want to adhere to, it makes it easier. The other thing is there are countries within the regions who have already implemented the best practice. So having someone who looks like you, has the similar problems that you do, live in the region that you live, work with you to get you where you want to get to, and who understands all the obstacles that may be there socially, economically, culturally, it's so much easier than having someone who doesn't know you, who's not part of your family, who doesn't speak your language, who doesn't share your culture, saying to you, this is how you can do it. So one of the great things that we have developed and are developing in the Commonwealth are different methodologies to get you to the same place. To say, this is the outcome we want. We want the following outcome. How do you do it? And can you help us? And I've been really so encouraged that what I've seen, and I've, as many people in this committee have done, I've been working with Commonwealth members of one sort or another since I was 21, which of course was only yesterday. And over those years, and one of the reasons I very much wanted to become the Commonwealth Secretary General, I saw the power of that friendship of that concern, of the ease with which Commonwealth partners work together. And actually, one of the most wonderful things to watch is laughter. You'll find Commonwealth citizens from all 6 different regions, and they'll be in a group together, and they'll be laughing, and not one of them has to say, "I was only joking."
And we have just a couple more quick questions, but you've been very, very, very explanatory and very, very helpful. Lord Joplin.
Yes, when quite a lot of people think about the Commonwealth, some issues which are nothing to do with intra-government Commonwealth relations come to mind. Things like civil society, cultural issues, education, election monitoring, sport, all these things. Do you believe that these matters are as important as governmental intra-Commonwealth relations, or do you think in a digital age they're even more important?
I think they're incredibly important. I mean, I referred to laughter, the fact that we share so many social and cultural things together. We have just launched the Commonwealth Hub, which the Queen very graciously came and officiated, bringing together the Royal Commonwealth Society, the Commonwealth Local Government Forum, the Commonwealth Games. And what we have found, you'll know that the Commonwealth Foundation is already within our building. What we have found is that synergy is really something which we need to celebrate. The opportunity to play together, to sing together, to do artwork together, all of that strengthens the fabric of the Commonwealth. And if we are looking at some of the harder-edged issues that we touched on earlier, on migration and radicalisation, many of those issues can be migrated through the cultural opportunities we have to work together. I have an aspiration, for example, to create a Commonwealth under-19s cricketing cup. Because the other thing that we have together, and it's quite bizarre and other people don't understand it, is Commonwealth countries love and play cricket. So the opportunity to have teams, boys and girls, but also to develop women's cricket as a means of getting people together, helping them to understand their similarities, sharing expertise. Playing games can teach our young people huge talents and make them employable. You've got to get up early in the morning. You've got to have your kit ready. You've got to think about somebody else. You've got to turn up. You've got to play. All of those things are having huge opportunities. And we've got to recognise that 60% of the Commonwealth will be below the age of 30 by 2030. 60%. Now, that is a huge resource in terms of trade and opportunity. But it could also be a troubling figure if that energy and talent isn't harnessed in an appropriate way. So I do think that those cultural, civic, society links are incredibly important. And as you rightly say, Lord Jobling, in this digital age, when you can have interconnectivity between those 2.3 billion people in a nanosecond all across the Commonwealth, it makes it even more important that we have those opportunities which highlight our common humanity, our common culture, and gives people an opportunity to meet one another on a fair playing field. Now, lots of people talk about the power that we have within the Commonwealth as soft power. I actually think it's diamond hard, because we need that power to humanise the other things that are happening to make people realise that we are one. We are one family, and this family can better care for each other if we come together and we try and do it on our own. I've been saying to people, and it's had resonance, that we all have a choice. We can either swim together in this new, complex, difficult world, or we can drown separately. And I'm for swimming.
One final quick question. With the benefits of the Commonwealth possibly becoming clearer all the time, are other countries wishing to join the family or associate with it or have observer status? What do you feel about that?
Now, no, there are many countries who are very interested in joining the Commonwealth. They celebrate its values. They look at the warmth and the support that happens between its members, and there is a queue for people who would like to join. Our values, however, are incredibly important. Having countries who wish to join, who really understand that the Charter isn't just an aspiration, it has become an expectation. That people may not all be there now, but we need all of our members to maintain that aspiration that that's where they will be in due course. And that's something which is very warming, to know that the special nature of the relationship that's seen from the outside by people is such that many want to join. And so I do see the Commonwealth as a stabilising entity at a very difficult time. Increases, people are increasingly looking for somewhere they can go which is consensual, because no one has to be a member of the Commonwealth. It is by consensus. The fact that we are creating new models which people can, if they choose, use and emulate is very important, because no one has to do it. And I think that for so long as the principles of the Commonwealth remain consensual, people will continue to want to join it.
But would you favour associate status?
Well, that's a conversation which I think has been going on for quite some time. You will know that it's a conversation that has to be had with the heads, because the heads, the 53 heads, have to agree as to associate status, if there should be, how it should be. And one of the beauties of my new position is that I am but the servant of the 53. But clearly we're going to be having some good conversations about what the criteria should be, who should join, and when.
Lord Joplin, you want the final word?
Could we just know the who are top of the list, and what stage has their application, if there is one, got to?
Well, the first thing to say is that we never disclose who is or is not in the process of...
Why is that?
Because diplomatically, it's always better to welcome a successful candidate than to publish abroad all those who have not quite made the cut. And one would like to have a continuing conversation. Some countries have had this as an aspiration for a while, and they are continuing to work towards it in the hope and expectation that they'll succeed. And they may. And so I think it would be very unfortunate to be discouraging them from continuing their efforts in that regard. The one that has declared, I think, is and is openly done so and has made it known to member states is, I think, South Sudan. But that's the only one.
You've been enormously helpful to us, very valuable. You've given us examples as well as the general picture. You yourself have a very big journey ahead, and we wish you well in it. And I think you've really opened up for us avenues to the future. So thank you very much for being with us. I'm sorry about the heat, but there we are. That's the way.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And if I can because I know that the committee had wanted to know more facts and figures in relation to the trade. I'm very happy to supply them. I have them all here, but I'm afraid I got carried away with actually answering the question. As opposed to
Thank you very much.
So I'm very happy to send you whatever further and other information you have. And just to reassure Lord Grocott that I see very clearly every single advantage, and I'm absolutely committed to making sure we take them.
Thank you. Excellent. That's great. Right.